The story of the Buddha is one of the most fascinating in all of human history. While billions know him today as the enlightened teacher who founded Buddhism, the man himself, Siddhartha Gautama, was a historical figure who lived in northern India more than 2,500 years ago. Over time, his life has been surrounded by legend. But historians and archaeologists have worked tirelessly to uncover the real facts about the prince who became the Buddha. Siddhartha Gautama was born sometime in the 6th century BCE, though the exact year remains debated among scholars. He was the son of a regional ruler in the Shakya clan, whose capital was Kapilavastu, near the present-day border of Nepal and India. This noble background gave Siddhartha the privileges of wealth, education, and status. Yet, despite being raised in luxury, he would one day abandon it all in search of truth. According to tradition, his mother, Queen Maya, dreamed of a white elephant entering her side before Siddhartha's birth, a vision later interpreted as a sign of greatness. Shortly after giving birth, however, Maya died, leaving the young prince to be raised by his aunt. Though many see this as part of legend, it reflects the themes of impermanence and suffering that would later define his teachings. Siddhartha grew up surrounded by comfort, but also with the burden of expectation. His father wanted him to become a powerful king who would expand the Shakya clan's influence. To shield him from hardship, Siddhartha was kept within palace walls, away from sickness, poverty, and death. Yet the very attempt to protect him from suffering only deepened his curiosity about the true nature of life. The turning point came in what Buddhists call the four sights. Escaping the palace one day, Siddhartha encountered an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and finally a wandering monk. These encounters opened his eyes to the reality of human existence, that all beings must face aging, illness, and death, but that renunciation and spiritual discipline might offer a way out of suffering. This was the moment that changed Siddhartha's destiny forever. At the age of 29, Siddhartha made a radical decision. Leaving behind his wife Yasodhara and their newborn son Rahula, he renounced his princely life and embarked on a spiritual quest. Known as the Great Departure, this act was not just a personal choice, but a symbolic rejection of worldly attachments. To those around him, it was shocking. To history, it became the beginning of a movement that would spread across the globe. For the next several years, Siddhartha lived as an ascetic, practicing severe austerities with other wandering seekers. He meditated for long hours, fasted to the point of emaciation, and denied himself all comfort in the hope of reaching enlightenment. But eventually, he realized that extreme deprivation was no more a path to truth than indulgence had been. This insight gave rise to what he called the middle way, a path between extremes. It was under a Bodhi tree in the town of Bodh Gaya that Siddhartha finally attained what he had been searching for. After nights of meditation, he reached enlightenment, awakening to the truth of existence, that suffering is an inevitable part of life, but that it can be overcome through spiritual discipline, ethical living, and the cultivation of wisdom and compassion. From that moment on, Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, the Enlightened One. The Buddha's first sermon, delivered in Sarnath, set forth the cornerstone of his teachings, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. These principles offered a clear and practical guide to overcoming suffering and achieving liberation. Unlike many spiritual traditions of his time, the Buddhist message was not limited to elites or priests. It was open to anyone, regardless of caste, gender, or background. This radical inclusivity helped Buddhism spread rapidly across northern India. As the Buddha gathered disciples, his movement grew into one of the world's most influential spiritual traditions. Yet at its heart, his story remained that of a man who had once been a prince, who walked away from wealth and power to seek the truth of existence. The historical Buddha was not a god, but a teacher, whose lessons continue to resonate more than 2 millennia later. After his enlightenment, beneath the Bodhi tree, the Buddha faced an important decision. Should he remain in peaceful solitude, enjoying the liberation he had found, or should he share his discovery with others? At first, he hesitated, believing that the truth he had realized was too deep and difficult for ordinary people to grasp. But compassion prevailed, and he resolved to teach. His mission was clear: to show others the path he had walked and to guide them out of suffering. The Buddha's first sermon, given in Sarnath to 5 ascetics who had once been his companions, became one of the most important moments in history. In it, he revealed the 4 noble truths: that life is marked by suffering, that suffering arises from craving, that it can be overcome, and that the way to end it lies in the Eightfold Path. This path, emphasizing right understanding, right action, and right mindfulness, offered a practical, ethical, and spiritual roadmap. With this teaching, the Buddha set the wheel of Dharma into motion. The 5 ascetics, initially skeptical, were so moved by his words that they became his first disciples. With this small community, or Sangha, the Buddhist order was born. The Sangha quickly grew as men and women from all walks of life joined. What made Buddhism unique was that it transcended caste divisions, which were deeply entrenched in Indian society at the time. For the first time, a spiritual path was open to all, whether a noble, a merchant, a farmer, or even an outcast. As the Buddha traveled across northern India, his reputation spread. He spoke in plain language that ordinary people could understand, avoiding complex rituals or metaphysical speculation. Instead, he emphasized direct experience, compassion, and personal responsibility. Kings, nobles, and commoners alike came to hear him. In an age dominated by priests and sacrifices, the Buddhist teaching was a revolution in thought. Yet, the Buddha was not without critics. Followers of the Brahminical tradition, who derived power from rituals and caste hierarchy, often clashed with him. They mocked his rejection of caste, accusing him of undermining social order. But the Buddha remained calm, teaching that true worth was measured not by birth, but by one's actions. His response reflected his core philosophy. Anger could only be met with understanding, and hatred could only be defeated with compassion. One of the Buddha's greatest skills was his ability to adapt his teachings to his audience. To farmers, he compared spiritual practice to tilling the soil. To kings, he spoke of ruling with justice and restraint. To families, he emphasized kindness and respect. This flexibility made his message resonate across all levels of society. His charisma and wisdom drew followers not through coercion, but through the strength of his example. The Sangha became a central part of the Buddhist legacy. Monks and nuns renounced worldly life, living simply, meditating, and spreading the Dharma. Lay followers, though not renouncing everything, supported the Sangha with food and shelter, gaining merit in return. This relationship between monks, nuns, and lay people created a balanced system that allowed Buddhism to flourish in society. Among the Buddha's most devoted followers was King Bimbisara of Magadha, who provided land for monasteries, including the famous Bamboo Grove Monastery. Another powerful supporter was Anathapindika, a wealthy merchant who donated Jetavana Monastery, which became a key center of Buddhist learning. These royal and commercial patrons ensured that the Buddhist teachings were not just preserved, but spread across northern India. The Buddhist family also played a role in his movement. His son, Rahula, became a monk under his guidance, while his wife, Yasodhara, later joined the community of nuns. Even his stepmother, Mahapajapati Gautami, became one of the earliest female leaders of the Sangha. This inclusivity was groundbreaking, offering spiritual paths to women at a time when such opportunities were rare. Through decades of teaching, the Buddha established a living tradition that touched every corner of society. His life as a teacher was not about divine pronouncements, but about guiding people to look within themselves. His message was not of worshiping him, but of practicing the path he had discovered. As the Buddha himself said, "Be a lamp unto yourselves." His role was that of a guide, illuminating the way for others to reach liberation. After decades of wandering, teaching, and gathering followers, the Buddha became one of the most respected spiritual leaders in India. His movement was not just about religion, but also about reshaping society. In an era where rituals and sacrifices dominated religious life, the Buddha's rejection of costly ceremonies resonated with the poor, while his emphasis on morality and compassion attracted those disillusioned by rigid traditions. His voice became a counterpoint to the prevailing order, offering a message of hope and equality. Among the many rival sects at the time, the Buddha stood out for his ability to debate with calm logic. He was known to engage with Brahmins, ascetics, and even kings in open discussions. Rather than dismissing others, he listened carefully, often reframing their ideas to reveal contradictions. His debates were not confrontational, but persuasive, demonstrating the power of reason over blind faith. This skill helped Buddhism gain credibility in a crowded spiritual landscape. The Buddha's insistence on nonviolence was particularly revolutionary. At a time when kingdoms were often at war, he advocated for peace, reconciliation, and respect for all living beings. Kings sought his counsel not just for spiritual insight, but also for guidance in ruling justly. The Buddha taught that a true ruler governed not through fear, but through compassion and fairness. His vision of a just society influenced rulers during his lifetime and for centuries after. Yet the Buddha also taught practical discipline. Monks and nuns lived by strict rules, known as the Vinaya, which regulated everything from how they ate to how they interacted with others. These rules were not meant to be restrictive, but to cultivate mindfulness and humility. Discipline, he believed, was the foundation for freedom. Without it, the mind would remain enslaved to desires. The Sangha's disciplined way of life became one of the hallmarks of Buddhism. Stories of the Buddha's encounters with ordinary people spread widely. One famous tale recounts how he comforted a grieving mother, Siddhartha Gautama, whose child had died. She begged him to bring the child back to life. The Buddha gently asked her to collect mustard seeds from a household untouched by death. As she searched, she realized that every family had suffered loss. Through this experience, she understood the universality of suffering and found peace. Such stories showed how the Buddha conveyed profound truths through compassion and relatable lessons. The Buddha also rejected superstition. While many saw blessings, miracles, or magical cures, he emphasized that liberation came only through understanding and practice. Although legends describe miraculous events surrounding his life, the Buddha himself downplayed such stories. He taught that the greatest miracle was not bending the laws of nature, but transforming the human heart. This rational approach made Buddhism especially appealing to those seeking a path grounded in experience rather than blind belief. As his fame spread, the Buddha traveled tirelessly, walking hundreds of miles across the Gangetic Plains. Despite his age, he continued to visit villages, towns, and royal courts. His simple robe, begging bowl, and serene presence became symbols of his message. He was accessible to all, whether a king or a farmer. This humility set him apart from other spiritual leaders who often surrounded themselves with wealth and privilege. One of the remarkable features of the Buddha's movement was its adaptability. As he encountered different communities, he adjusted his teachings to fit their context without losing the essence of his message. This flexibility allowed Buddhism to take root in diverse regions, from small villages to powerful kingdoms. The seeds he planted during his lifetime would later spread across Asia and, eventually, the world. Despite the growing following, the Buddha never sought to establish a cult around himself. He consistently reminded his disciples that he was only a guide, not a savior. His parting words to them were not to depend blindly on teachers, but to rely on their own understanding. Be your own refuge. This rejection of blind authority made Buddhism unique among the world's religions and ensured its survival beyond his death. By the time the Buddha reached his 80s, he had created one of the most enduring spiritual traditions in human history. His legacy was not just in the monasteries or the sermons he delivered, but in the transformation of lives. Kings who ruled more justly, merchants who lived more ethically, families who practiced compassion, and ordinary people who found peace amid suffering. The man who once left his palace in search of truth had become the teacher of an entire civilization. As the Buddha entered his later years, his presence was felt more strongly than ever. He was no longer just a teacher, but a symbol of wisdom and compassion throughout northern India. Everywhere he went, people flocked to see him, hoping for a word of comfort or a blessing of understanding. Despite his age and frailty, he continued to walk long distances, supported at times by his devoted disciples. His mission was not yet complete. His goal was to ensure that the Dharma, the truth he had discovered, would endure beyond his lifetime. Among his closest disciples was Ananda, his faithful attendant. Ananda was known for his remarkable memory, preserving countless teachings and dialogues of the Buddha. He remained by the Buddha's side, anticipating his needs and ensuring that the Sangha could continue to learn from their master. Without Ananda's devotion, much of what we know today about the Buddha's teachings might have been lost. The bond between teacher and disciple exemplified the heart of Buddhism: respect, humility, and the transmission of wisdom. During these final years, the Buddha encountered challenges within his own community. Some monks began to quarrel over rules or interpretations of his teachings. The Buddha often reminded them that unity and harmony were essential for the survival of the Sangha. He urged his followers to avoid attachment even to the Dharma itself, teaching that clinging to words and rituals could be as much of a hindrance as clinging to wealth or power. His message was clear. The essence of his path was wisdom and compassion, not rigid dogma. His reputation continued to grow beyond the Ganges plain. Rulers from distant kingdoms sent envoys to seek his advice, while traders carried stories of his wisdom along ancient trade routes. Slowly, Buddhism was becoming more than a regional movement. It was turning into a spiritual force with the potential to spread across cultures. Even during his lifetime, seeds were being planted that would later blossom into one of the world's major religions. In his last great journey, the Buddha traveled toward Kushinagar, a small town in northern India. By this time, he was in his 80s and frail, yet still determined to continue teaching. On the way, he accepted a simple meal offered by a blacksmith named Kunda. Soon after, he fell gravely ill. Despite his suffering, he showed no fear of death. Instead, he used the moment to teach his disciples once more, reminding them that impermanence was the very nature of existence. The Buddha's final instructions to his disciples became some of his most powerful teachings. He urged them not to depend on him, but to rely on their own practice. He said, "All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence." These words captured the essence of his message. Liberation was not about devotion to a master, but about personal effort and inner transformation. His death was not the end of his journey, but the completion of it. When the Buddha passed away, his disciples were overcome with grief. Yet they soon realized that his life had been an embodiment of the truth he had taught. Nothing was permanent, not even the presence of the Enlightened One. His passing, or parinirvana, was described not as a tragedy, but as the natural culmination of a life lived in harmony with truth. It became a moment of profound teaching in itself. Following his death, the Buddha's relics were divided among various kingdoms and enshrined in stupas, monuments that became centers of devotion and meditation. These stupas allowed the Buddha's presence to be felt even after his passing. They also helped spread Buddhism far and wide, as pilgrims travel to honor these sacred sites and carry stories of the Enlightened One back to their homelands. The Sangha, guided by senior disciples, held the first council shortly after his death. At this gathering, monks recited and organized his teachings, ensuring they would be preserved orally for generations. Ananda's memory played a crucial role in this effort. The council marked the beginning of Buddhism as a tradition sustained not by the physical presence of its founder, but by the collective memory and dedication of his followers. In the decades that followed, Buddhism spread rapidly across India, shaping cultures, philosophies, and societies. The Buddha had not left behind temples of gold or armies of conquest. Instead, he had left a living truth, carried forward by ordinary men and women who sought freedom from suffering. His passing marked the end of his life, but the beginning of a global movement that would endure for millennia. After the Buddha's death, his disciples faced the challenge of preserving his teachings in a rapidly changing world. Without their master's presence, the responsibility fell on the Sangha to maintain unity and fidelity to his message. The first council at Rajagir was a turning point, where hundreds of monks gathered to recite the Buddha's words. Ananda recalled the discourses, while Upali recited the rules of discipline. This oral tradition, passed down with great care, became the backbone of early Buddhism. As generations passed, the Sangha split into different schools of thought. Some emphasized strict adherence to monastic discipline, while others explored philosophical questions about reality and consciousness. These divisions reflected the adaptability of Buddhism. It was not a rigid creed, but a living philosophy capable of evolving. What united all schools, however, was the core truth taught by the Buddha. Suffering could be overcome through wisdom, compassion, and ethical living. Buddhism began to spread far beyond its birthplace. Merchants and travelers carried the teachings along the Silk Roads, bringing them to Central Asia, Sri Lanka, and eventually China. Monks often accompanied traders, setting up monasteries along routes that became both spiritual and economic lifelines. This fusion of commerce and philosophy ensured that Buddhism would become one of the most widespread traditions in human history. In India, kings and rulers became key patrons. The most famous was Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BCE. Horrified by the suffering caused by his own wars, Ashoka embraced Buddhism and vowed to rule with compassion. He built stupas, supported monasteries, and sent missionaries as far as Greece and Southeast Asia. His reign marked one of the greatest expansions of Buddhism, transforming it from a regional movement into a global force. The philosophy of Buddhism also grew richer over time. Early teachings emphasized individual liberation, but later schools such as Mahayana stressed the ideal of the bodhisattva, those who, instead of seeking personal nirvana alone, vowed to help all beings reach enlightenment. This shift reflected the enduring spirit of compassion at the heart of the Buddhist teaching, adapting it to broader audiences. Art and architecture became powerful vehicles for spreading the Dharma. The serene images of the Buddha carved into stone, painted in caves, or cast in bronze captured not only his likeness, but also his message. Each gesture, each symbol, the lotus, the wheel, the empty throne, communicated profound truths. These images carried the presence of the Enlightened One into lands he had never walked. As Buddhism spread, it encountered new cultures and philosophies. In China, it merged with Taoist traditions, emphasizing harmony with nature. In Tibet, it blended with local spiritual practices to form Vajrayana, rich in rituals and symbolism. In Japan, it inspired Zen, a path of meditation and simplicity. Each transformation reflected the flexibility of the Buddha's message, universal truths expressed through local languages and customs. At the same time, Buddhism never lost its original heart. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and the call to compassion remain this foundation. Whether in a monastery in Sri Lanka, a temple in Kyoto, or a meditation hall in California, the Buddhist core insights continue to guide seekers. Life is impermanent. Suffering is real, but liberation is possible through wisdom and love. In the modern world, the Buddhist teachings have found new relevance. As people face stress, inequality, and conflict, practices like mindfulness and meditation have offered peace and clarity. What began under a tree in India more than 2,500 years ago has become a global tradition embraced by millions across continents. His words, "Be a lamp unto yourselves," continued to inspire individuals to take responsibility for their own lives and choices. The historical Buddha was not a god nor a myth, but a human being who sought truth and found the path out of suffering. His journey, from prince to seeker, from teacher to enlightened one, remains one of the most extraordinary stories in human history. His legacy is not measured in temples or empires, but in the transformation of hearts and minds across millennia. The man who walked barefoot through Indian villages became a guide for all of humanity, his light shining across time.